from beautiful Princeton, New Jersey. As president of the American Whig-Cliosophic Society, the nation's oldest collegiate literary and debating society, it is my honor to open this debate for the New Jersey 3rd District Democratic primary. Since our founding in 1765, Whig and Clio have played host to the great debates in American public life. From the American Revolution and the drafting of the Constitution, to the war in Iraq and the impeachment trials of former President Trump. Today, we are gathered here to continue that great tradition, to hear from candidates for the Congress of the United States on why they should represent New Jersey for the next 2 years. To the candidates, I want to say thank you for agreeing to come here and participate in this great American tradition. I hope that we can model here a more civil, open, and constructive debate, that conversation that so often seems to be lacking on the national stage. To the audience, I also want to say thank you for being here to participate in this civic exercise. As informed citizens, the future of our democracy lies in your hands. I hope that you all will listen closely to what our candidates have to say here, and will come away from this informed about your choices and ready to cast your ballots. Now, before we begin, I do have to read the following statement. The American Whig-Cliosophic Society adheres to the principles of institutional neutrality as described in our Freedom of Expression Code. As such, and in accordance with university policies, the American Whig-Cliosophic Society does not adopt as an institution political stances, does not endorse or oppose political candidates or parties, and does not otherwise engage in partisan political activities. This event was not organized or authorized by any party or candidate. During this event, candidates are not permitted to distribute campaign materials or to solicit funds, and all candidates will be given an equal chance to express their views. Once again, neither Princeton University nor the American Whig-Cliosophic Society endorses, supports, or opposes any candidates in this event. Candidates are not permitted to distribute campaign materials or solicit funds during this event. Thank you for your attention. Now, allow me to introduce our distinguished panel of moderators. Tyler Doe, class of 2027, our society's director of program. Sophia Bernstein, class of 2027, the speaker of the American Whig Society. And Koa Sands, class of 2026, the president of the Whig-Clio Senate. Their dedication and hard work have made this event possible, and we owe them our deepest appreciation. Without further ado, I will hand it off to Tyler.
Good evening. My name is Tyler Joe, and it has been my pleasure as Director of Programs to coordinate with the candidates and organize this forum. We're proud to say that we're the only organization that has invited all the candidates in this race. Without further ado, let's meet the candidates. Joining us today are civil rights attorney Joe Cohn, business owner Sarah Shogun, Assemblywoman Carol Murphy, and public school educator Brian Skeeper. Assemblyman Herb Conaway was invited to this forum, but withdrew without citing a reason. I'll hand it over to Koa Sands and Sophia Bernstein, who will explain the forum rules for tonight.
Good evening, and welcome to the American Whig-Cliosophic Society's NJ-03 Democratic Primary Forum. To begin, each candidate will have 1 minute to give opening remarks. Following opening statements, we will move into a period of moderated questions. After each question is asked, the candidate will have 1 minute to answer. Once your time has elapsed, you will hear this bell.
After the moderated questions, there will be a period of rapid-fire questions where candidates will have a 30-second response time. The audience will then be invited to submit questions to be asked. Candidates will have a minute to respond to audience-submitted questions. Finally, candidates will be invited to give closing remarks for a minute each. Candidates will answer questions in order from left to right, starting with the candidate who's first called.
Okay, let's get started. Okay, Mr. Cohn, this first question is for you to start. Americans across the nation and in New Jersey are concerned about the ever-increasing cost of living. Many young people now feel that home ownership is out of reach for them, and families are struggling to afford basic expenditures like gas and groceries. As a member of Congress, what will you do to address the cost of living crisis? Mr. Cohn, we'll begin with you.
Thank you so much for that question, Tyler. Addressing cost of living issues, affordability issues, is one of the most pressing priorities we have to address in Congress. And we need to tackle it wholesale across the board. We need to figure out ways to rein in the cost of higher education. We need to think about ways to provide student debt relief. We need to think about ways to Thank you so much, everyone, for being here.
Okay. So I would say to address this starts, especially for younger people who are having a hard time affording houses and basically everything that, it needs to start with affordable education, higher education. And when we graduate high school, we need to be able to attend college, and if we're going to take out loans, we need to cap the interest rate. Right now, students are taking out interest rates between 5 and 10%, and that's what I call a life sentence of debt, and that creates a domino effect. We graduate school, we're in debt, we can't afford to buy houses, people can't afford to go out to eat, and the cost of living is very expensive. So I think in order to address affordability for younger people, we really need to address the student debt issue. And like I said, having interest rates at the federal level is of extreme importance.
Okay, my turn. Thank you all for joining us, allowing us this opportunity. But I want to tell you, so as the Assemblywoman and I serve as the majority whip in the state of New Jersey, I can tell you that affordability has been the most forefront at our feet the last several years, including this year where we just passed a bill that would abolish COA and also make it the ability for each municipality to determine what is their affordable housing needs. And as we start seeing more and more housing being built, affordable housing, it's for this purpose, is to make sure that kids who do, young adults who do graduate college, who want to start a family, want to continue living and working and staying in New Jersey, is able to do through affordable housing. And we need to make sure that regardless of what zip code we're talking about, everybody is eligible to live in that municipality. And with the help of each municipality determining and talking with the residents as what is needed, I think that's going to give us a better idea as to what is needed of each municipality.
Thank you, the American Whig-Cliosophic Society, for hosting this debate. I think affordability is really important. It starts everywhere, but student loans, the interest, Congress sets the interest rate. It can be set to 0. It should be set to 0. Done. That doesn't solve all of the higher education cost problems, but it at least solves that all of your money is going to principal. On top of that, we have to address wages. Productivity has risen 80% in my lifetime, and wages have on average risen 8%. That's not a reasonable expectation of workers in the 21st century, that wages are that low while housing costs are skyrocketing, local and federal taxes are still increasing. And so those are all things we have to address. So we can address a federal minimum wage of $15. We can talk about affordable housing, but we also have to talk about taxes and how the Trump tax plan has increased our taxes for the next year and a half.
Thank you very much. New Jersey election laws have been under intense scrutiny leading up to the Democratic primary this June. Last summer, the state passed the controversial Elections Transparency Act, which critics argue has been detrimental to election transparency. Last fall, Senator Bob Menendez was indicted on charges of corruption. Ms. Schoengood, you joined Congressman Andy Kim, who currently holds the congressional seat, and others in a lawsuit to abolish the county line and redesign the New Jersey ballots Attorney General Matt Platkin called unconstitutional. What will you do as a New Jersey elected official to improve trust and public confidence in government within the state of New Jersey? Ms. Schoengood, we will begin with you.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I mean, transparency is, to be a true democracy is we need transparency. And right now you see bills, you see Oprah is under attack. We need to put pressure on our officials to make sure that that stays open for all New Jerseyans to be able to access information and be able to hold our elected officials accountable here in the state. And in terms of having a block ballot, we need to make sure that that goes all the way through and that is put into law for both Democrats and Republicans. Having a block ballot is a way to elect leaders, who you want to. It's not manipulated by party bosses. So ensuring that we do have the block ballot system and the county line system is officially abolished is going to be crucial for that as well. Thank you.
Goodness, thank you. You know what? Democracy is on the ballot this year, ladies and gentlemen. It is huge. It is something that we have to make sure that we fight for. Everybody's voice should be heard come June 4th. Regardless of who you vote for, regardless of what your stance are, regardless of what our stances are, you should vote for the right person. We're going to bring back trust the same way I do it in the Assembly now, is that I work with both sides of the aisle. We do mutual conversations. We work together on issues. And we have controversy and debate. We love debates, right? We debate, we're so. But as Congress moves forward, nothing gets done. I think we recognize nothing gets done in Congress because we're not working with our officials. We're not reaching out. So one of the things I did real quick was, before I even entered the race for Congress, so this is how I knew I wanted to be there, was that I started reaching out to my federal legislators who said, hey, we need to start working on things. New Jersey has passed so many bills. We passed the $17. We're up to $17 minimum wage. We passed the 15 with the CPI index going up. We worked on affordable health care, so we need to start working with our federal legislators to make that happen on the federal side.
I applaud the decision of the county line. It's about time that we put voters over party, and that voters have a clear and easy ballot to look at and read and make a decision, rather than having to take out a ruler and make sure that they're watching the grid very carefully. Civility is a problem. Their democracy is fragile, I agree. I don't think anyone can disagree with that. Extremism has taken hold on both sides of the aisle. It's, I have an 11 and a 13-year-old, and there are some committee hearings that I don't want them to see parts of because it's just getting, it's too much for an 11 and a 13-year-old to watch, and it's not how I want to parent my children. It's not how we talk to anyone. It's not how they should talk to each other, and we don't model that. Compromise isn't a dirty word. Progress can happen quickly, but often we see what we're seeing now. We see a kickback, and so if we sort of work through it and compromise and find solutions, then we have less fight.
Building trust in a democracy is a long process. It's a long process that requires consistency across the board. I was pleased to do an amicus in the lawsuit to end the county line system because that system betrays the Democratic Party's nationwide promise of defending democracy. Democracy is under assault across the entire country. Idaho limiting how college students can access ballots. North Carolina limiting the amount of time for remote ballots. Georgia asking for 2 affidavits before someone can vote by mail. We have to be consistent in defending democracy. I think the 4 of us opposed the line, our 5th opponent didn't. I also think the bill in the legislature on OPRA is an abomination and needs to be rejected. If I were in Congress, I'd be fighting for the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which restores many key aspects of voting rights scrutiny across the country. And I guess my time is up. My remaining points later.
Thank you, candidates. This December, Assemblyman Conaway sponsored a bill that would mandate parental approval for minors before joining social media platforms. Assemblywoman Murphy, you publicly opposed the bill, pointing to its effects on LGBTQ youth. If elected to Congress, would you support increased restrictions on social media platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook? And if so, what kind of restrictions would you support? So Assemblywoman Murphy will begin with you.
Absolutely. You know what, that was a bill I did oppose because it did not only have impact on the LGBTQ community, but also those platforms for kids who turn to that to be able to communicate with other members of their community. Right? It's not necessarily just about being there. Our social media is an issue. It causes a lot of harm to a lot of kids, but it's not the social media platforms per se, it's what's put on there. So we really need to come up with a plan that addresses the materials and how does that look? And in Congress, and when we talk about transparency, we talk about the right to know, we talk about Oprah. And as you know, unfortunately, home rules a lot when it comes to the Oprah situation, the right to know, which is on the federal side, and John Lewis voting that. We have to ensure that what is being put on social media, that's what needs to be looked at. That's what needs to be tempered down. So when kids return to that social platform to talk to other members of their community, let's take a member of the LGBTQ community, and I'll wrap this up, that they want to be able to talk to members that maybe aren't living next to them, that don't understand what they're going through. And these platforms allow them that opportunity to do so.
As a parent and a teacher, I see it all. I have students, I call one name in the classroom and one name on the phone, and I call mom and dad. And I understand the concern with all of that, and as a parent, I see the YouTube rabbit hole that goes who knows where to some really terrifying things. And so I don't think that there is a simple solution to this. And I'm not going to pretend to propose one tonight that will work, but I will say that it is a complicated question, and it's something that parents have to be careful of with their children in teaching them how to be responsible social media users. But I also know that it's really easy to go down a rabbit hole and find yourself in a place you never thought you would as a very young child. And so I think it's important that we honor children that are figuring themselves out and young adults, and we also honor children's innocence. How do we do that?
Well, I guess this is my opportunity to address an area of strength. I'm a lawyer, I'm a First Amendment lawyer, I'm a civil rights lawyer, and for the last 12 years I've been fighting for free speech across the board for young people. And I'll just say this as clear as day. The bill in the New Jersey legislature is unconstitutional. Assemblywoman Murphy's plan that she just described of regulated content is unconstitutional. You do not get to regulate content under the First Amendment. That's First Amendment 101. Okay? So that's first. We can start thinking about whether or not we should have rules about access to social media in the classroom, where there's increased studies about the harms to the educational experiences. But ultimately, we need to be educating students better about using social media and the tools that we have in healthier ways. We cannot overregulate it. We need to trust our society to figure it out by giving better guidance and trusting people.
So, yes, I agree with Joe Cohen here. I do not believe that the government should play a role. I believe that there was a bill that the Republicans were trying to pass through Congress over a year ago now, and it was for ousting LGBTQ students to their parents in the classroom. And we need to play every role in protecting students. And I believe that, we can maybe offer more trainings for parents, maybe of how they can teach their kids social media safety. We can have more incentives to have trainings and courses in school for students to best navigate social media, because there are a lot of dangers that come with it. And I think that we can have a lot more awareness and education, especially when kids are young.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Just a few weeks ago, Attorney General Platkin sued several school districts in New Jersey, alleging that their school policies harm the rights of transgender children. Meanwhile, many parents are concerned about how the public school curriculum handles topics regarding gender and sexuality. Mr. Schieper, your school district, Ocean City School District, is no exception to this trend, having experienced disputes between parent groups and LGBTQ advocacy groups on the inclusion of gender and sexuality in the curriculum. How will you address the concerns of parents on ensuring the safety of LGBTQ youth in New Jersey and across the nation? We'll start with you.
Yes, you're right. There have been some very contentious board meetings, and I'm proud to call some of those student activists my students. They fight for their own rights, they fight for their friends, and sometimes their lives. School districts do not have a say in what they teach. The state decides what is taught. Some of my friends are the health teachers, and they teach the curriculum as it is stated. And outside of a couple things that I think some parents sort of see on paper but don't understand how in context it works, I think it's a matter of just educating and understanding that it's not advocating for any lifestyle or sexual preference or any of that. It's just understanding that these things exist, and how to be safe and be understanding in the world. So I oppose any legislation that would limit the right to information for a student. I mean, plain and simple. Like it's unhealthy and unsafe.
Thank you for that question. I have been fighting for the civil rights of the LGBT community through most of my career. I've served as the legal director of 2 ACLU affiliates. I got my career started at the AIDS Law Project in Pennsylvania doing HIV and AIDS housing cases. Protecting LGBTQ students is something that's near and dear to my heart. Now, the federal government does not set curriculum. It's not allowed to. So, the real question in Congress is going to be, are you going to provide protections against discrimination for LGBTQ students in the classroom, outside the classroom, in the educational environment? We need to make sure that gender identity and sexual orientation are protected classes, and that needs to be the price of admission for the rest of the conversation about the more difficult things. Athletics, bathrooms. We need to make sure that at the very least, everyone agrees that no student should be harassed and should be protected from it, and then we can sort out the rest.
So absolutely, you know, in terms of what Congress can do, we can definitely pass more legislation to protect these students, and you know, there will be consequences if you are harassing or harming them. But something else that needs to be talked about more is the push for book banning here, especially in New Jersey. We need to keep access open for all students to be able to have access, you know, to read books that they want to read. And for, you know, it's not for any school in the district to ban that and take away that right from people. So I think we need to, you know, put a push on that, whether it's through legislation, and make sure that students have, you know, access to the education that they need as well.
All right, so I'm going to kind of go in a different angle here. After speaking with many of my superintendents and in my district, as well as in Berlin County, I can tell you where the issue is that children and young adults of the LGBTQ community, rightfully so, wants to be identified with who they want to be identified with. That's just who they are. You know, if they're trans, they want to be identified. If they are transiting into male to female, female to male, whatever the case may be, they want to be identified that. They want all their records to reflect so. Where it's becoming a problem is that they don't want their parents to be called. They don't want their parents involved because they are young adults and they feel that they have a right to determine what it is that is reflected on their records. When we get down here, if you haven't seen it, California right now is dealing with that very particular issue as well in the courts. So keep an eye on it. That's what the school districts are having the most problem with, is that changing the rules to not allow parents notification when the child changes everything that's in their school records.
Thank you, candidates. Climate change is increasingly impacting New Jersey's coastal communities. In New Jersey's 3rd Congressional District, for example, communities like the Bass River Township are becoming more vulnerable to sea level rise and extreme weather events, and many have been seeking government support for protection against the effects of climate change. What will you do to support communities affected by climate change? Mr. Cohn, we will start with you.
Well, climate change is one of the most pressing issues of our time because it's an existential threat. And we can't let perfect be the enemy of good. I think we need to take a top to bottom approach. One thing that I would do in Congress is I would introduce legislation to ask every federal agency to explore every single square inch of land that it has, every building, every parking lot, to see if solar panels could be installed. I'd like to provide the block grant to do that. It will reduce the cost of energy consumption for every federal agency. We'll have excess energy to sell or give to lower income people struggling with their bills. Next, I would provide a similar program for block grants for states to repeat that same process and with communities as well. Every school, you name it, every government building should be looking for ways they can drive energy costs down. So that's the first. We need to invest in every kind of clean energy. We need to diversify our sources and wean ourselves
sure that we're putting pressure on all federal agencies to make sure that they're putting pressure to make sure that we have a clean energy, by 2050, let's say. And something else that, should be talked about is electric vehicles. Even how we can all kind of contribute at more of a local level. They need to be more affordable. We need to make sure that people are able to also contribute and afford to have EVs right now. Right now they're very expensive. So there's a lot of things that we can do, but there needs to be legislation to make sure that, there is a plan to decarbonize. And also global peace treaties are very important. Climate change is something that needs to be addressed at the global scale. Thank you.
So you know what, agree with my colleagues up here on the fact that climate change is an issue that is national. So not only that, but it's international. As a person who's been to Ireland several times, that's a #1 priority as well. So there's no bigger voice in the assembly or in the legislature than myself, who is out there promoting renewable energy, making sure that we have that addressed. As you know, President Biden, as well as Governor Murphy, has set the goal of electrification by 2035. Whether it can be achieved or not, we don't know, but we are working towards it. I've also done op-eds on the wind solar energy and making sure that New Jersey is one of the leading states. Think about this, we're one of the leading states who's leading the way in the wind solar energy, renewable jobs. So with that being said, we are addressing these. We've come up with reforms in New Jersey, and I will continue to do that in federal government.
I agree, it's an existential crisis. I have now an 11 and 13-year-old, but when we were starting to plan family and our friends were starting to plan family, that was a topic of conversation around the coffee table was, should we have kids? Is it responsible to have kids? Are they going to have, what future do they have? We have to consider that. We have to consider where are people going to be buying houses. We have to consider where people are going to work and live. We live, when I took the Ocean City job, I checked the sea change to see if I could retire. I could, depending on how bad it was going on. So I think we can find some subsidies for workers who don't drive to work, who regularly live within a certain commute distance, right? Maybe they get a little extra subsidy on a little deduction, a carbon deduction effectively, right? But these are all conversations that are a big problem for future Americans.
The war in Ukraine seems likely to persist for the foreseeable future. And thus far, the Biden administration has directed $75 billion in aid to Ukraine, which includes humanitarian, financial, and military support. In your view, what, if anything, should be done to further address Russia's invasion of Ukraine? Ms. Schoenberg, will begin with you.
Yeah, so, this invasion, Russia's not slowing down. If anything, they're ramping up. And it's crucial to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs to defend itself. And I would not necessarily say that I would make any changes in how the United States needs to make sure that they're passing aid through to Ukraine. That's something that's really struggling, emergency aid through Congress right now. I think that, countries in NATO, I think, need to come up with a plan about how to address Russia and, figure out a way to, through diplomacy, handle this situation. I think we do need to really, a big emphasis on de-escalation and diplomacy always is very important, and I think that, the European countries, the United States can play a really big role in that. Thank you.
So I don't think you're going to hear too much different of me other than we as the United States, one of the strongest, most powerful countries in the world. What we do in the United States matters around the world, and people are scared of that, including Russia. 4 years ago, the administration coddled Russia, made them part of the team, made them feel secure, allowing the ability for them, I feel, to take advantage of other countries around the world. We as America have to continue honoring our commitment to support Ukraine in the ability to continue defending itself. We have to assure that they have the resources, all while making sure what they're using it for is exactly that, to help in the war of Russia. Russia is huge, and we as the United States are not going to be able to just eliminate them from the world. But we do have to come up with common sense, strong leadership to assure that Ukraine is successful at the end of this war.
I'll make a slight correction. It started with the seize of Crimea under the Obama administration that was allowed to remain. And it's continued since. And it's a problem, and it's a threat to democracy around the world, and it's a threat to American democracy and sovereignty of all democratic countries. What should we do? Pass aid. Send it. Get it there. Continue to work with international partners and allies and get more aid there. And then we should sanction Putin into submission, to be quite frank. They will not stop until there is no resource left to move. So that's the short of it.
Well, we're going to be 4 for 4 on this one. President Putin's aggression in the region has been consistent since he's taken office. It's not going to stop until he is stopped. And Republicans holding up the aid to Ukraine is egregious. And it underscores why it's so important that we elect Democrats to Congress. So I would do a vote to send the aid immediately. And I agree with Brian that we need to be working with regional partners to implement sanctions across the board that are tough, that force them into submission. Ultimately, all wars end with some form of final diplomatic solution when one side thinks it can't proceed any longer. And we need to bring about those conditions as quickly as we can.
Thank you, Mr. Cohn. Many Americans rely on public transit for work, school, and recreation. However, in New Jersey and across the nation, many public transit systems are unsafe, in poor condition, or simply are not viable options. If elected to Congress, what would you do to address the challenges facing our nation's public transportation systems? Assemblywoman Murphy will begin with you.
You must have been in the budget committee yesterday. We have New Jersey Transit and DOT and MDC there. I would have to say that it very rarely goes positively all the time, no. But those are one of the issues we addressed, was transit. I took a trip 3 times in the last month to New York City. All 3 times my train broke down. Heard from the conductor, don't lean against the windows. Don't lean against the door. So with that, we were talking to New Jersey Transit Director yesterday about these very same conditions. The fact that we need more trains that are reliable. Get rid of the old trains, which my understanding, they have more coming in by the end of the year. So all those single-layer trains are being are going to be gone, so we have them done. But more importantly, we have to make sure that the people operating these machines are trained. And in Congress, as we started dealing with our infrastructure between our roads and our bridges and our train lines, South Jersey, I've been a huge advocate to ensure that South Jersey gets more train lines. Because public transportation, if we're dealing with climate change, we have to start making sure that our public transportation is able to accomplish that as well.
I hope in the budget committee we also talked about the school funding. That's
Oh yeah,
in dire straits.
we'll get to that when we get to education.
Awesome. I hope. I think we can move back to the climate change question of people living closer to where they work, right? And if we can, now this is a long process, right? This isn't quick, but of course we need to address safety of vehicles and options and infrastructure, but also where one works and where one lives, especially in this metro area, all of New Jersey, Philadelphia, New York, and even parts of Delaware. Sometimes, I got an hour each way because we felt the school was good and we could afford the house there, and that was the job. And so I think if we can provide incentives for people to live closer to where they work, also providing infrastructure so that public transport is an option, right? It's not an option for me. I can't possibly try it. Unless I were to spend 4.5 hours on a bus, I think I should have checked it before I came, but,
So, public transit is really a key towards addressing climate change. And it's also really crucial for lower income people to have access to public transit as well. In Congress, one of the key questions that we'll have to address is the ratio of federal dollars that go towards improving public transit and the money that goes to expanding highways. Okay, so that's the key tension, and that's the key question. And where you put your money tells you where your priorities are. So we need to start shifting a larger chunk of that budget towards developing new public transit lines in South Jersey so more people can use it, to improving the lines and equipment where it exists. And we need to be thinking about housing as well, by building housing near public transit lines. As well, for the reasons that Brian was describing about people being able to live near where they work. We need to live near where they work, or they need to live near a public transit line when we think about how we do city planning.
So the third district of New Jersey has a very high amount of commuters who travel into New York City, in and out of New York City every single day. I was one of those people for a year. And I can't tell you how many times I was late for work because our bus broke down. And then I would go to the train and the train's delayed because the train broke down. So we really need to be investing money to make sure that we have, new buses, new trains, make sure that they're not, you go on your bus, it's even a health hazard for people as well. You see gum that's been on the seat for 10 years. I mean, we really need to put our money into our public transportation because a lot of people rely on it. And building houses closer to transportation, that can definitely be a long-term goal. But right now, we need to make sure that our money is going to make things easier for commuters, which, like I said, is a very large percent of the district. We also have to keep public transportation affordable for people as well.
Thank you, candidates. Last month, Governor Murphy called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Congressman Kim has also voiced his support for a bilateral ceasefire. Earlier this month, President Biden told Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu that U.S. aid to Israel would be conditional on treatment of Gazan civilians. What should our approach to Israel or Palestine look like, and how will you balance the competing interests of your constituents on this issue in Congress? Mr. Schieper, we will begin with you.
The human cost of this conflict is immeasurable and unnecessary in the 21st century. And so I think I applaud all calls for a ceasefire, immediate and long enough to get humanitarian aid and innocent lives out of harm's way. And so I support the work of the Biden administration, regional partners, and all of that. And I think that's essential. How we balance that, I mean, I think that the Biden administration's two-state solution is a viable option. That is a lot of talks away. But immediately we have to get innocent lives out of harm's way. That's the priority. Start there.
This is a question that is on the forefront of literally everyone's minds. The main goal has to be finding and forging a lasting peace. And there are not easy solutions to get there that don't have
congressional leaders need to show that they understand. You don't need to understand every single conflict, every single war. You need to understand that there's a process that has to happen in order for there to have a permanent ceasefire. And again, I think the United States really needs to play that role.
So, I think as we, this is, like Joe has said, that this is at the forefront of everybody's conversations. What we have to look at is that what happened on October 7th, the initial attack that happened on October 7th, was created by a terrorist group, Hamas, which Hamas is a terrorist group in Palestine, the Palestine government. As in any war, my father served in Vietnam and Korea, fought both wars, and I saw the devastation on his face every day as a teenager. It's never easy to be part of a war. Civilians are caught in the middle of both sides, whether you're in Israel or you're in Palestine. Hamas is the problem. And unfortunately, what happens is that a ceasefire happens, Hamas will go underground again and resurface again in 5 years like they have done so many years prior to this. And what we are seeing now is the devastation of what this looks like when we deal with terrorist groups. And we have to keep that in mind as the United States, that while we stand with Israel and support their needs, as I do believe in Congress, we will continue standing with Israel, we have to assure that terrorists are eliminated from the equation. That's the only way we're going to ceasefire.
Thank you, candidates. Mr. Cohn, you've made addressing polarization a centerpiece of your campaign, and it's no secret that American politics are incredibly polarized. Just this past session, the government was almost shut down. So how would you work to pass effective legislation in an increasingly polarized political landscape? We'll begin with you.
Thank you so much for that question. I think addressing our polarization has to be our single biggest national priority because I think it's our biggest national security threat. How we treat each other prevents us from solving any of the problems we've already discussed tonight and any of the problems we'll discuss in the remainder of the night with anything more than damage. So the way I've been able to do it in my career, where I've been in legislatures across the country fighting for civil liberties, is by being extremely patient, extremely consistent, and having as many dialogues across the aisle as possible. I'm the only candidate in this race who has won on our issues in states where Republicans have control. I've beaten bills that would have rolled back protections for the press. I've beaten bills that would have curtailed the right to choose in red states. I've defeated over 22 bills that would restrict how race could be taught on college campuses in red states where I didn't have the map. The only way to do that is through open dialogue and consistency, and that's what I'm doing in Congress.
So the gridlock in Congress that we've seen for years, but it's especially bad now. I believe there were 27 bills passed last year. It's inexcusable and it's really hurting Americans. So I think in terms of legislation, we definitely need to focus on bipartisanship, what legislation we can pass to help the American people. You know, I could say, I believe that no one should have a gun, but, you know, we can work across the aisle and we can get legislation that will put protections in place, you know, to be harder to get a gun, so comprehensive gun legislation. But ultimately, what we need to be doing, especially in our campaigns, is we need to be working to flip seats blue, because our country is going to depend on having the House of Representatives back in the Senate and winning the presidency, and we really need to be putting in the work during election years to make sure that we are winning those seats so we can really pass through legislation that's going to help the American people, that people are so desperate for.
Yeah, this is an issue that, like I told you in the beginning of when we started, that as an Assemblywoman Majority Whip, I have been very successful at working across the aisle already in the state legislature. I have co-sponsored or primed close to 400 bills in the 6 to 7 years that I've been in office. One of the largest amount of bills that have been signed into law by the government. And you want to know what? I get the phone call from my friends across the aisle saying, hey, can I get on your bill? Because we know it's going to do what we need to get done. They might not agree with everything, and we have these conversations. And that's what it's about. In DC, what we're seeing is too much politics. We're seeing people have problems and argues, but no real solutions. And the only way you're going to solve that is to have conversations. And we say this on the budget committee, and we started doing this again, because all legislators got away from doing this. And that is have a dialogue and debate, like what we're doing here, and I'll finish up. What we're doing here, having debate, but leave those doors and have similar conversations on the outside. That's the only way we're going to get anything done. And that's what I will bring to DC. That's what I will work with many of our groups to do.
Again, I'll go back, compromise isn't a dirty word in politics. That's how things get decided, right? And so collaborate, you build coalitions, you build friendships in the ways that you can, even with people you disagree with. I have great friends, and there are topics we don't discuss because we vehemently disagree about it. And we exist around that, and that works well. How would we make a decision if we needed to engage that topic? We would talk about it, and we would say, listen, we don't agree on these things. Let's find some commonalities. As a teacher, as a musician, collaboration is key. It's how you work it, right? You start where you want to head, and you work your way through it. And I think that plus education helps, because polarization, part of that is education, all right? Not indoctrination, just education. This is how this process works. Yes, we want A, B, and C. We may only get A and maybe half of B today. We'll try next time for the rest of it and go for C, and just keep working. So education is part of it.
Thank you, candidates. Fentanyl and other opioids continue to steal the lives of Americans across the nation, taking nearly 1,500 American lives every week, according to the National Center for Health Statistics. The DEA reports that China and Mexico are, quote, the primary source countries for fentanyl and fentanyl-related substances trafficked directly into the U.S. What must be done to end the fentanyl crisis in America? Ms. Schoengood, we will begin with you.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we definitely need to, make sure that this is not coming in through our border, but with the fentanyl crisis, I think that we need to make sure that there are resources for people. This isn't something that's going to go away overnight. As I'm speaking with people through the district, a lot of people have family members who were victims to this crisis, and we need to make sure that, one, funding for resources exists at every level, and we also need to make sure that people are able to navigate the system and find the resources that they very desperately need. People have family members who are struggling, and there might be resources right now that do exist, and they don't know that it exists. So we need to make sure that there is transparency, and we're educating the public of what does exist, and we need funding for more programs at all different stages of this issue and addiction.
You know what, I'm going to maybe make a little bit of a different statement here. In the state of New Jersey, as a legislator, in our legislature, we have addressed a lot of the programs that deal with opioid addiction. I visit many of our rehab, including Oaks Integrated, including Maryland House. But where the real problem with fentanyl coming in is that it's the criminals that bring it in. The crime is the problem. And we talked about this on a big level. We can get rid of it everywhere we want to. We can have Narcan up to the ceiling, ready to help an overdose. We can take it off of our shops. We can take it out of the pharmacies. We can prohibit a doctor from using it or from prescribing it. But the criminals will always find a way of getting it in. And that's what needs to be addressed. I've been working with my law enforcement and my prosecutor's office since I've got elected to hopefully address these issues and identify those folks who do need treatment and getting them the treatment they need. And hopefully, Narcan is only a Band-Aid approach, because we just keep supplying it. We need to, let's get on a really, my colleagues, education on healthy living habits, including rehab.
As the son of, my father had untreated mental health issues and substance abuse problems that took his life before I turned 5. I'm a foster parent to 13 kids and probably more in the near future. And many of those were for drugs and untreated mental health. And so addressing the immediate problem, as all my colleagues have said, is tough because it's coming in from all different places. and it's hard to pinpoint some of those. Certainly work toward those pipelines and work to limit that, the chemicals going back and forth, allowing it to get made, but also treating mental health and early addiction so it doesn't ramp up to the level of fentanyl overdoses is key. It needs funding for all of those resources. And it's not simple, it takes a while. All of these problems take a while, but we can restart.
Well, folks, our drug policies across the board are broken across the United States. You might have noticed that. We can't only deal with drug problems, whether it's fentanyl or anything else, by just criminalizing usage. Okay, so we have to figure out ways to deal with the usage side from the health perspective, because that's how you can drive down the demand. Whenever there's a drug issue, you're dealing with both supply side and demand side. And we can deal with prosecution on the supply side of people who are importing in illegal drugs, who are selling drugs unlawfully. But where we really need to also put in an emphasis is on the demand side through the mental health aspects and the rehabilitation resources that are sorely lacking, as well as the education, because a lot of people don't realize exactly how dangerous fentanyl is or how it's laced in other things.
Thank you, candidates. Changing decades-long precedent of strategic ambiguity towards Taiwan, President Biden announced that he would pledge to defend Taiwan in the event of an attack from the PRC. Do you support this pledge? Assemblywoman Murphy, we will begin.
Okay. This is a fairly new topic compared to we talk about Israel and Ukraine and all of that. But you know what? Like all these other countries that we defend, and we protect our allies, and we work with our allies to ensure that they're able to defend themselves. I don't know a lot about what his plan is as far as what his particulars are, and I don't think anybody will know unless you're sitting in Congress and you're part of those conversations. But if we go down the pipe where we are going to defend, I will pledge to continue to defend Taiwan against the PCR and assure that we as America continue protecting our allies.
I think the Taiwanese people speak openly and regularly what they want. And I think Biden is listening, and he's pledging the American support to them. And I'm honored with that. I think that's the right course. And I support it, yeah. So, I mean, short and simple.
I also support Biden's plan to defend, protect the interests of Taiwan. I think we do have to stand behind our allies. And I think we could be doing a lot to strengthen regional democracies in Asia for the long run, as we consider the potential of growing threats from China over the years. So, yes, I would support the President's plan on Taiwan.
I would also support it. And again, the Taiwanese people are very clear what they want. So in addition to supporting it, I think it is clear that China is closing in on Taiwan as the weeks go by. I believe that's public knowledge. They're closing in on Taiwan, and I think what the United States should be doing is, yes, we will defend them, but we should start strategizing how, because China is obviously a very powerful country, so I think that we really need to have conversations about who we're going to be working with and how we are going to combat China and make sure that they don't invade Taiwan. So I think that those are really important conversations as we all pledge to back interfering and defending our ally.
Thank you, candidates. For our final question in this section, let's talk about healthcare. Democrats broadly agree on the goal of universal healthcare for all Americans, but sharply disagree on the best way to achieve it. If elected to Congress, how would you ensure that all Americans have access to high quality and affordable healthcare? Mr. Speaker, we'll begin with you.
Yes, I think we have to defend the ACA. When my son was 2, I was underemployed. My wife and I didn't have insurance. The ACA just was passed. She got them on there as soon as possible, and a few months later, he started swelling up, and it turned what looked like a regular allergy turned into a kidney disease diagnosis that he needed a lot of care to put back into us. And so for all of that, we didn't have to worry about our bank balance, and that was the concept. And so we need to support the ACA, we need to expand it, we need to expand Medicare and Medicaid, especially dealing with the doctors that won't accept the plan, because that's a big problem as a foster parent. The foster kids are on Medicaid, and trying to find a doctor that will take a new patient is like a needle in a haystack. In New Jersey, I believe it's 37% of doctors will take new patients with Medicaid. We're one of the worst in the country in that. So I think education, expanding, funding, subsidizing, getting people the care they need.
Lowering the cost of healthcare is incredibly important because especially as people get older, it consumes a larger and larger part of government budget. So one of the first things that we can do is remove the age restriction on Medicare. And it doesn't have to be the only option, but anyone who wants to participate in it should be allowed to have it as an option. The second thing that we need to do is we need to build on the success of the Inflation Reduction Act, which for the first time in our history allowed us to negotiate price and 10 medications with Medicare system. We need to create a permanent formula of how new drugs will go onto the negotiation list. And I have a plan for that. That 1 minute is not sufficient to go deep into what we really need to figure out how to do is we will have to, each Congress figure out, do we have enough votes to add one new drug or two new drugs?
So as stated already, it is extremely important to protect the ACA. But other things, and again, making sure that prescription drugs are affordable. And a Medicare for all option, you know, this is a very scary word for a lot of the country, but everybody having access to healthcare is not a bad thing. So whether it's Medicare for all with a private option, I know I only have 1 minute, but I tell a story. I was overseas and I developed a sinus infection, and I needed to go to the doctor and I needed an antibiotic. And I was hysterical crying because I was nervous that I wasn't going to be able to afford it because I was not insured. And to my knowledge, everything altogether was $17 US. So essential doctor visits, medication, whatever it is, it should be affordable and accessible for every single American.
So yeah, you're gonna probably hear the same thing for me, is that affordable health care is a right, it's not a privilege. Everyone should have the ability to be able to acquire affordable health care. Medicare for all, as we look into it, and then there's bills in Congress, you have to make sure it's the right one. Because right now, go home and ask your grandparents how many visits they get covered under their Medicare. Not a lot. So we have to make sure Medicare for all is the right way to go. ACA, I have my own health insurance through the ACA right now. And I am honored in the fact that I'm able to afford the coverage that I have, which is still not the greatest coverage there is. Just to give you a quick example of how unaffordable this is, if I was single and on my own, and I'll tell everybody this, as a legislator, I make $49,000 a year. Off the top comes to about $18,000 in health care, and that's not including my $2,500 out of pocket and deductible. Take taxes out of that, and how much do you have left for a job because of my health care? And it is a right, and it should not be a privilege. Everyone deserves affordable health care.
Thank you, candidates. We will now enter a series of rapid-fire questions. For each question, candidates will have 30 seconds to respond. Beginning with you, Mr. Cohn, what makes you stand out?
What makes me stand out is that I have the experience dealing in situations and environments where Republicans have real power and won on our issues. No one else in this race can say that. And that's really important because even if we take the majority in Congress, our adversaries will have real levers of power. And I also stand out because I work really hard in those environments to build trust on both sides of the aisle and to run consistently.
So we're in uncharted waters here in our country. These are very special times, and I think that
So, yeah, you know what? First of all, as a city legislator, I come with 20 years experience in government, just not legislation, but also as a staffer for 6 years, 7 years. Prior to that, I worked in government in schools development authority. Prior to that, I was an 18th division, does go down with me. Prior to that, 18 years in the legal field, handling all kinds of issues, from criminal to workers' comp to personal injury to contract law. And then as I got into government, doing everything under the scope. And as a legislator, go look at my bills, you see those areas that I cover with. And those are areas that our working families need to yes.
We've heard a lot of words, but one that keeps coming up in answers is education. I'm an educator. So I know the problems that education have, teacher attrition, teacher retention, student preparedness, college affordability. I'm a foster parent, I'm a parent of a teenager and an almost teenager, right? And so the issues that are here, I'm living. And I think that suits me well to be where I am and to be going after the position that I'm going.
In 2 words, describe yourself. Ms. Showigood.
Wow, do I have 30 seconds to think about that? I am angry and I am motivated.
Okay, I have to tell you that I am very much honorable and I am respected amongst my nation.
Indefatigable, the best recommendation letter I've ever read. Indefatigable. So I didn't define myself. And hardworking.
I'm reasonable, and I am consistent.
Thank you, candidates. What is your #1 priority if elected to Congress? Assemblywoman Murphy, will begin with you.
Oh, wow. There's so many of them, but I'll tell you right off the bat is affordability. Making sure that our families here in New Jersey, because remember, home rules, the state has done a lot, but we on the federal side has not. We have to ensure that our states are permanently equipped with the resources they need to continue making sure that families are able to stay here. Kids are able to continue going to college. We have food on the table, clothes on the racks, jobs available, because our workforce is struggling right now. And we have to do it all with the idea that we are able to bring the resources and the ideas of the legislation to the federal government to make that happen.
It's hard to choose, and I don't want to just piggyback, so I won't piggyback.
Oh, you can, you have 13 kids, right?
No, not all at once, no, we only have 6 at a time.
Sorry, that one.
Sorry. No, I think education and affordability are essential. Right? We're seeing taxes raised local and federal over and over again. Wages aren't keeping up. Inflation, while it's coming down, corporations are still charging more and more or putting less food in the bag. And so those are all issues of affordability that are hitting the starting workers first.
I think the most pressing thing right now is defending democracy, because our system will either be upheld or it will not. And our ability to address everything else, and I don't disagree, because no one in Congress can only tackle it in one day. There's always several issues. But if we don't maintain our democratic system with integrity, it doesn't matter if things are affordable for the next few years. It isn't going to last.
Abortion and women's rights. Right now, as everybody here knows, women's rights are really under attack. And what people often forget is that abortion is more than just terminating a pregnancy. It's an essential medication used for emergencies during pregnancy, different miscarriages, and it saves women's lives. And that is important to protect. And another thing is IVF under women's rights and healthcare. IVF is not just used for infertility, but it's also used for women undergoing cancer treatments and different treatments to have a shot at having a child in the future.
Thank you, candidates. We will now have a 5-minute break. After the break, we will enter a period of audience questions. Please use the QR code displayed up on the projector to submit your question during this break, and we will select the questions to be answered. Candidates will have 1 minute each to respond to audience questions when we return. Thank you.
forgotten.
How you do?
Hello.
Alrighty, pretty ready?
Yeah.
All right, welcome back, everyone, and welcome to the town hall section. Thank you all for submitting questions. Let's get started. We'll get started with a hand-raising question, after which you will have 1 minute to respond. First, raise your hands. Do you support expanding the Supreme Court? Very interesting, and we'll get started with Mr. Schieber. 1 minute.
The Supreme Court number has changed, I think, 3 or 4, maybe 5 times. It's gone up, it's gone down, and now we're at 9. And so I think it's entirely fair to eventually have a plan to get it up to the number of districts we have, so 13. Am I tied to a number? No. But expand. Not necessarily partisan. It doesn't, we can, again, develop a plan, so it's fair, but still.
I think attempts to expand the Supreme Court, tempting as they are, will only lead to more expansions when your side doesn't have control. There isn't a way to just get the system that produces the court decisions that you want. So I think we need to take the long view approach. I know that I'm referring here on the panel. We need to take the long view approach that sometimes we'll have a Supreme Court that isn't well connected to the American people. And there will be dark times as a result of that. But tweaking the Supreme Court by packing it will make the dark times more permanent.
So I would accept under certain, circumstances expanding it, but what I think we really need to do is have term limits in the Supreme Court. I think that would tackle a lot of the issues. I don't think that any Supreme Court justice should be there for a lifetime. I really do believe that if we pass through term limits in the Supreme Court, that it'll allow over a certain amount of time to get new voices in, and you know that what they do is not going to play out for the next 40, 50 years. So I support term limits more importantly than expanding.
So, I do support expansion of our Supreme Court. But one thing that, as you can see, and I think we've all alluded to it up here, is that politics plays a big role in who gets appointed to the Supreme Court. Remember, Congress does not make those appointments. It goes through the Senate and then through the President. The same as in state government. The state senators as well as the governor does appointments. But one of the things that we have to make sure is that whoever does get appointed, their main objective is not to be biased. Their main objective is not to have opinions. Their main objective is to rule according to the law, not according to one person's beliefs. And I don't think our Supreme Court has done a very good job of that, is leaving their opinions at home and doing what they feel the person who got them appointed is doing. So when expanding the Supreme Court, we do have to make sure that they rule according to the law, not according to opinions.
Thank you, candidates. Next question, I know this is one that impacts a lot of New Jersey residents. What is your view on New York City's congestion pricing plan? And does it harm New Jersey residents, or is it a good idea? And we will start with
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
the New York City congestion pricing plan. What are your thoughts?
It's not an issue that I thought was not about, so I don't want to give you an answer off what we're done.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go off that. I don't want to give an answer that I'm not too familiar with.
So the congestion tax price was just passed last week, 15%. And let me tell you something, it is going to hurt New Jerseyans, especially up north. Because people who go from New Jersey into New York every day for a job and they want to live in the suburbs of New Jersey and raise their family here, they're going to have to pay that congestion price tax every time they cross that bridge. And that's in addition to tolls being raised. Like I said, I went to New York a few weeks ago and I got charged a tax for just taken a taxi from the train station to where my meeting was. But what is this? It's going to hurt the pocketbooks of our residents. It's going to make it harder for them to be able to travel into New York to be able to continue doing the work they need and making a living for the family. When we talk about affordability, think about is that really affordable to continuously do this on a day-to-day basis every time we cross that bridge into New York?
New York is the center of so many things, arts being one of them. And the number of times I grew up in North Jersey, the number of times we would just head out because it was a 20-minute drive. And it was easy to get to. I can't imagine how much it's going to cost for students to go to museums, to go to performances, and all of that now. And so I think it's, I wasn't in the process, but I think anything that taxes the people who live on one side of the river to save the other side is not a fair process or a fair system.
Alrighty, thank you, candidates. Now, you've spoken a lot tonight about issues on which you agree with the president, but could you speak on an issue on which you disagree with the president and why? And we'll start with Michelle.
Yeah, so something I disagree with the president, especially in terms of foreign policy, is I think that he and the administration really need to draw very clear red lines so we're not all over the place overseas. So, I would just like to see the more red lines drawn. This way we're not inconsistent, and this way we're not looking a certain way weaker overseas and backtracking. So that would be my disagreement.
It's very hard to say what I disagree with the president and what I don't. But I can tell you there's a lot of his stances and a lot of the goals that he does is admirable. But we also have to look realistic. When I hear things that he talks about that maybe come across as unrealistic, you just want to say that's very unrealistic because you're just putting that out there to say that. So where I do disagree with the president on a lot of things is when we sit there and we talk about these issues where it does impact women's rights, it does impact affordability, it does impact affordable health care, and not being able to make a decisive answer and standing to his guns and standing up to the minority party when we need someone strong and to say this is what we need to do and this is what we're fighting for. So I'm going to continue fighting. I think he capitulates a little too much for the sake of compromise. And I think at some point we have to say, this is what we're doing.
I think Biden's presidency, it's been a long evening, presidency is going to be one of the most consequential of my lifetime, I'm assuming, the number of bills and accomplishments. I think as I'm thinking and listening, I think I would say that the student loan forgiveness the slow rollout of it is probably something I would disagree. I think he could have moved a little faster, a little bit less, very specific, targeted. Maybe there are certainly conversations I'm not involved in, and so I'm sure there are reasons as to why, but that doesn't mean I don't get to disagree on it. So I'll disagree on that.
Well, I'm very proudly support the president, but I don't feel I have absolutely everything. And my biggest area of disagreement was the withdrawal in Afghanistan and how it unfolded. But it could have been done better. And I think a lot of people in that region gave a lot to the United States and a lot of tremendous sacrifices to make our efforts there a success. And we owe it to them to pass legislation to help streamline refugee status here. We owe it to that community, to all the people there who helped our military succeed and save American military lives, treat them with the dignity that they need. And I wish the president had done a better job on that. But I'm also very proud of so many of the other things the president accomplished.
All right, thank you, candidates. And we will have two more questions. Firstly, serious one. It's often said that democracy is on the line when we vote. In your view, what is the biggest threat to American democracy today, and how should we be addressing it? And we'll be starting with Lisa.
So, like I said earlier, democracy is on the ballot this year, and I think with the assistance of Congressman Kim, one thing that New Jersey did do was abolish that line, and that is one of the biggest threats because what it did. And look, I've been in office, I've been voting. The line has always played an important part, but this year came to show, especially democracy being such at the forefront of our countries, that every single Democrat, every single Republican, every single Independent, wherever you vote, you have a right to voice your opinion as to who you want. And when we see those folks put the pressure on the thumb of the scale to make sure that their favorite person wins, that's just wrong. And I've seen this more and more over the last few years of how important it is to get rid of that line. And as I'm talking to many of my colleagues, they sit on the National Foundation for Women Representatives, and I listen to them about how their elections are. The fact that they are out there having a primary with people who are like all of us. We all have that right to vote.
I think I'll try to be quick. Well, I will be quick in general. Succinct. Voting rights and gerrymandered districts are the biggest threat to a well-functioning democracy. And so we have to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. I agree with Joe. And we have to find ways to un-gerrymander. That includes blue districts, un-gerrymander, like just clean up the districts so that as many districts as can be fair are fair. I don't think there should be a safe district. We don't get American voices that way. We get party voices.
Jesus, like trying to pick between the big and the child. It's an assault in so many different directions. I said throughout my campaign that the polarization is our biggest threat because it's created a situation where we have an insurrectionist movement each growing situation that's allowed the former president who tried to not leave office who's on the cusp of potentially winning the White House back if we don't all work as hard as we can to prevent that from happening in the ballot box. But if I had to pick a 1A, it would be all of the Voting Rights Act attacks, the ones here at home to the line, the gerrymandering that Brian suggested, and all of the attempts to make it harder to vote. We need to be addressing that comprehensively because democracy only functions as well as its rules, as well as we are consistent. So those are the things that I would prioritize.
So very quickly, the county line system was, it was a huge, it kept New Jersey undemocratic. So abolishing that line was major, but there is an entire political ecosystem in New Jersey that definitely needs a reboot, and that also, we need to put more pressure on the media as well and how, they cover elections because a lot of people look to the media for information. But I would say the number one biggest threat to democracy this year is Donald Trump. And I said earlier, and he mentioned it again, this is a man who is behind an insurrection. He did not want to certify last election, and he's very clear. He is very clear about who he would be if he wins again. And I mean when I say I don't like to be an alarmist, but I always say this is not politics as usual. I don't know what the country is going to look like in a year from now, and we talked about all the legislation and things that we want to pass, but the reality is that starts with Joe Biden winning again in November.
All right, thank you, candidates. This is the last question. It is perhaps the most important question of the night, and it is a hand-raising question. So candidates, please raise your hand if you believe that Central Jersey exists. Wonderful. All right, thank you all for coming today. Yes. This concludes our period of audience questions, but candidates will now have 2 minutes each to share their full closing statements. So, Mr. Cohen, we'll begin with you.
Oh, okay. Thank you, everyone, for coming out here tonight. I know you could have been at home streaming to Congress matters. Not because we are so wildly different in our instincts on certain policies, but because what is happening in DC requires a certain degree of skill and experience to get things done. I said before, I'm the only candidate in this election who's won in areas where Republicans have had serious levers of power, and that is true. I've been a civil rights lawyer fighting for every kind of civil right you can care about and have cared about. I've been the legal director of two ACLU's lineage where I've done LGBTQ advocacy. I've done prisoner civil rights. I've done racial profiling cases. I started my career doing HIV and AIDS hazard cases. And I've been doing free speech work across the country now for 12 years. And it's in that work that even though I didn't have the map on my side, because you almost never have the map on your side when dealing with free speech issues, because guess what? People censor who they disagree with. I had to go to legislatures of every kind and tell the supermajority no. I never had the map, but I won consistently. We are in a situation right now where so much is at stake that we need to send someone in Congress who can navigate Congress as it actually is, not how we wish it was. And that's why I think I'm the best person for the job. If we want to change how Congress operates, we need to send people who reject the us versus them, who have big ideas to fix the country. Ideas on student debt relief, on funding universal pre-K, on immigration, and on improving access to healthcare and foreign policy. And I have big ideas. Thank you for letting me share them with you, and thank you for letting me share the stage with all of you.
So I would also like to thank you all for hosting us and for you all for attending and participating in this democratic process. As we all talk about democracy, it's really important that all of our voices get to be heard and we get to share ideas and be in situations like this. So with that being said, I am running for office because I believe that we need a new generation of leadership and a new generation of problem solvers. I believe that we can't keep sending the same type of career politicians to Washington and expecting to see new results. As I travel around the district, I see people really hurting. I see people who are not able to afford to send their kids to college. They're working multiple jobs. I'm seeing people who are affected by the opioid crisis. I'm talking to people who are scared to send their children to school because they're doing active shooter drills. We need fresh voices to help combat the pressing issues of the 21st century, and there needs to be room at the table for younger voices to help shape the future that we have to live. I'm a small business owner. I've built a business from scratch. I know what it's like to give up payroll so my employees are paid. I know what supply chain issues are. I know the labor shortages that are going on. There's so much that needs to be addressed. And ultimately, this comes down to really needing fresh perspectives and new voices in Congress. And right now, this part of my campaign is I'm really working to energize and mobilize voters to show up in November because, as I've said before, the only way that we can continue, all of us can continue to fight for you, especially at the federal level, is keeping the seat blue and getting back House control. So, thank you all.
Thank you. Look, we are all up here asking you to consider us for Congress. Reason because we all believe that we are the best candidate for the job. And we probably all are. Right now, sitting in the legislature doesn't mean that I'm going to go to DC with bad decisions. It means that I'm going to be bringing the decisions that I've been doing here in New Jersey to DC and working to make them work. Government works best when we have a fair representation. And fair representation means not just the man or the woman who is 65, 70 years old, who's spent his or her whole life in office. It means people who bring fresh ideas, and more importantly, who brings resolve, who brings the solutions. Because right now, what we're seeing in DC is a lot of rhetoric, a lot of arguments, no real solutions that we can agree on. And no matter how you look at it, government is always going to have politics in it. You're going to need people who's going to stand up to those wrong politics and cut their way through all of that rhetoric to get something done. But more importantly, I will tell you this. New Jersey has sent 300 and some odd people to Congress. Only 7 have been women. And when we talk about representation, we need to talk about women's representation, women's voices around there, because we are part of the families. We do take care of our families. We go to work. We do the things we need to do. We are, some of us are breadwinners, and some of us are not. And I will tell you that more women around that table, like what we have in the legislature, and I'm very honored to be able to sit around that leadership table and help fight for the things that we need here. And in Congress, I'm going to do the same thing by conducting, making sure we continue with our town hall meetings to hear all of your voices. And I want to thank all of you today for the questions. I want to thank all of you for everything you've done. And I urge you to keep debating, and I urge you to keep talking about those controversial issues that matter the most, not only to yourself, but to your family and friends.
As a teacher and a union leader, I know firsthand that taking time away from teaching simple division to learn how to survive a school shooting is unacceptable. And at high levels of teacher attrition, leave unstable classrooms for our students to compete on the world stage. I'm the son of a social security retiree, and I know the struggle that many have to endure every day, choosing between medicine and food. Social security is a promise many rely on to survive, and I will do everything in my power to make sure it isn't cut and find ways to expand and give back more to the seniors who have given us so much. And finally, when my wife needed medical care for a miscarriage, she was able to get it without hesitation, a right many sadly can't access today based on the state they call home. So when people ask me why I'm running, the answer is it's personal. I know that we can reach for more than political gains and effectiveness masquerading as change. We can elect someone that understands everyday struggles that need real solutions. Elect someone that can find commonalities, and elect someone who will build relationships and make real progress. And I thank you for hosting and you all for attending and asking questions. And I humbly ask for your vote if you are in the district.
Thank you, candidates. That will conclude the NJ-03 Democratic Primary Forum. On behalf of the American Whig-Cliosophic Society, thank you to all the candidates, and thank you all for joining us tonight.